Question 1. When evaluating an application for a pistol permit in Alabama, and the applicant has a documented history of arrests that did not result in convictions, what is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for the permit examiner to take? Option A. Automatically deny the permit application due to the presence of any arrest records, irrespective of their disposition. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all arrest records and related incident reports to determine if they demonstrate a pattern of behavior or specific circumstances that, under Alabama law, indicate the applicant lacks the good character required for a permit, while also verifying no disqualifying convictions exist. Option C. Issue the permit without further scrutiny, as the absence of felony convictions means the applicant automatically meets the criteria. Option D. Base the decision on personal judgment regarding the applicant's perceived future risk, even if not directly supported by specific statutory disqualifiers. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of all arrest records and related incident reports to determine if they demonstrate a pattern of behavior or specific circumstances that, under Alabama law, indicate the applicant lacks the good character required for a permit, while also verifying no disqualifying convictions exist. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's desire to exercise their Second Amendment rights with the state's legitimate interest in public safety and responsible firearm ownership. The applicant's past behavior, while not resulting in a criminal conviction, raises concerns about their judgment and potential risk. A firearms permit examiner must navigate these complexities without infringing on constitutional rights or compromising public safety, adhering strictly to Alabama law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's history against the specific criteria outlined in Alabama's pistol permit statutes. This means meticulously reviewing all provided documentation, including any records of arrests or incidents, and evaluating them in the context of whether they demonstrate a propensity for violence, a disregard for the law, or a lack of good character as defined by Alabama Code Section 13A 11-75. The examiner must determine if the applicant meets the statutory requirements for good character and is not disqualified by any specific prohibitions. This approach is correct because it directly applies the legal standards set forth by the state legislature, ensuring a decision is based on established law rather than subjective bias or speculation. It respects the applicant's rights while upholding the state's mandate to issue permits only to those who qualify. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit solely because the applicant has a record of arrests, regardless of whether those arrests led to convictions or were dismissed. This fails to adhere to Alabama law, which typically requires disqualification based on convictions for certain offenses, not mere arrests. It also ignores the statutory requirement to assess good character, which is a more nuanced evaluation than simply looking at arrest records. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the permit without any further investigation or consideration of the documented incidents, simply because the applicant has no felony convictions. This would be a failure to exercise due diligence and to properly assess the applicant's character and suitability for carrying a pistol, potentially jeopardizing public safety. Alabama law implies a responsibility to ensure permit holders are not a risk. A third incorrect approach would be to base the decision on personal opinions or assumptions about the applicant's potential future behavior, rather than on the objective evidence and the specific legal criteria for permit issuance. This constitutes an arbitrary and capricious decision-making process, which is ethically and legally unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the specific statutory requirements for pistol permits in Alabama, including definitions of disqualifying factors and the criteria for good character. 2. Thoroughly reviewing all submitted application materials and supporting documentation. 3. Conducting independent research as permitted by law to corroborate information and identify any relevant legal disqualifiers. 4. Applying the legal standards objectively to the facts of the case without personal bias. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for approval or denial, ensuring it aligns with Alabama law. 6. Recognizing that the burden of proof for disqualification rests on demonstrating that the applicant does not meet the statutory requirements. Question 2. The analysis reveals that an individual in Alabama is considering carrying a pistol for personal protection during their daily commute. They are aware that obtaining a pistol permit is a process, but they feel the need is immediate due to recent local news reports of increased crime. What is the most legally sound and ethically responsible course of action for this individual to take regarding carrying a pistol in Alabama? Option A. Obtain the required Alabama pistol permit before carrying a pistol in public. Option B. Assume that carrying a pistol for self-defense during a commute is implicitly permitted under Alabama law without a formal permit. Option C. Carry the pistol without a permit, believing the immediate perceived threat justifies the action. Option D. Carry the pistol without a permit and only seek legal advice if stopped by law enforcement. The correct answer is A. Obtain the required Alabama pistol permit before carrying a pistol in public. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict adherence to Alabama law regarding firearm possession. The temptation to carry a pistol without the proper permit, especially when feeling a perceived need for self-defense, is a significant ethical and legal hurdle. Careful judgment is required to understand that perceived need does not supersede legal requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves understanding that Alabama law requires a pistol permit to legally carry a pistol in most public places. Therefore, the most responsible and legally compliant action is to obtain the necessary permit before carrying a pistol. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and responsible gun ownership, which are fundamental ethical obligations for any firearm owner in Alabama. It demonstrates an understanding that personal convenience or perceived threats do not grant an exemption from state statutes. Incorrect approaches analysis. Carrying a pistol without a permit, even if one believes they have a valid reason or are in a situation where they feel threatened, is a direct violation of Alabama law. This approach disregards the legal framework established to regulate firearm carry, potentially leading to severe legal consequences, including arrest, fines, and imprisonment. Furthermore, it undermines public safety by allowing individuals to carry firearms without undergoing the vetting process associated with permit acquisition. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that certain locations or circumstances automatically exempt one from permit requirements without verifying the specific provisions of Alabama law. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a potentially dangerous misinterpretation of legal statutes. Finally, relying on informal advice or personal interpretations of the law, rather than consulting official sources, seeking legal counsel, is an irresponsible and risky approach that can lead to unintentional legal violations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Alabama, when considering carrying a pistol, should always begin by thoroughly understanding the legal requirements. This involves consulting the official statutes and regulations governing pistol permits in Alabama. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from law enforcement agencies or legal counsel is paramount. The decision-making process should always prioritize legal compliance and public safety over personal convenience or subjective assessments of risk. This ensures responsible firearm ownership and upholds the integrity of the legal system. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that a robust risk assessment framework is crucial for effective firearm permit administration. In Alabama, when reviewing an application for a pistol permit, which of the following represents the most appropriate risk assessment approach? Option A. Denying the permit based on a subjective assessment of the applicant's perceived trustworthiness and lifestyle, even if no specific legal disqualifiers are evident in the application. Option B. Expediting the permit issuance process without a thorough verification of all submitted documents, assuming the applicant is likely to be a responsible gun owner. Option C. Requiring the applicant to provide additional personal information and references beyond what is explicitly mandated by Alabama's pistol permit statutes. Option D. A comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation against all statutory requirements for pistol permit eligibility in Alabama, including age, residency, and absence of disqualifying criminal history as defined by Alabama law. Correct answer is D. A comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation against all statutory requirements for pistol permit eligibility in Alabama, including age, residency, and absence of disqualifying criminal history as defined by Alabama law. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's desire to exercise their Second Amendment rights with the state's legitimate interest in public safety and preventing firearms from falling into the wrong hands. The Alabama Pistol Permit Exam, while optional, aims to ensure a baseline understanding of firearm safety and relevant laws. A permit holder's responsibility extends beyond mere possession to safe handling and adherence to all applicable state and federal statutes. The best approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's submitted documentation, cross-referencing it with Alabama's specific legal requirements for pistol permits. This includes verifying the accuracy of information provided, ensuring all necessary supporting documents are present, and confirming the applicant meets the age and residency criteria outlined in Alabama law. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the statutory framework established by Alabama for issuing pistol permits, prioritizing legal compliance and public safety without introducing subjective biases or extraneous considerations. It ensures that only individuals who meet the state's defined qualifications are granted permits, thereby upholding the integrity of the permitting process. An incorrect approach would be to deny the permit based on a personal opinion about the applicant's perceived character or lifestyle, even if no specific disqualifying factors are present in their application or record. This fails to adhere to Alabama's legal criteria for permit issuance and introduces an element of arbitrary judgment, which is ethically and legally unacceptable. Another incorrect approach would be to expedite the process and issue the permit without a complete review of the application and supporting documents, simply because the applicant appears to be a law-abiding citizen. This bypasses the mandated due diligence and regulatory requirements, potentially overlooking disqualifying factors and compromising public safety. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to request additional documentation or information that is not legally required by Alabama law for pistol permit applications, thereby imposing an undue burden on the applicant and deviating from the established regulatory framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the governing statutes and regulations. They must then meticulously review all submitted materials against these legal requirements, ensuring objectivity and fairness. Any deviations from the established process or the introduction of subjective criteria should be avoided. When in doubt about the interpretation of a regulation, seeking clarification from legal counsel or the relevant state authority is a prudent step. Question 4. The investigation demonstrates that an Alabama resident who had a minor misdemeanor offense from several years ago that has since been expunged from their record is considering purchasing a handgun for personal protection. What is the most prudent course of action to ensure compliance with Alabama's pistol permit and firearm laws? Option A. Seek advice from online firearm enthusiast forums to determine if the expunged offense will impact pistol permit eligibility in Alabama. Option B. Purchase the handgun first and then immediately begin the process of applying for a pistol permit, hoping for the best. Option C. Proactively research Alabama code sections pertaining to pistol permit eligibility and any specific provisions regarding expunged offenses before acquiring a handgun. Option D. Assume that the expungement of the misdemeanor offense automatically clears any potential barriers to obtaining a pistol permit in Alabama. The correct answer is C. Proactively research Alabama code sections pertaining to pistol permit eligibility and any specific provisions regarding expunged offenses before acquiring a handgun. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-protection with the legal requirements for firearm ownership and permit acquisition in Alabama. Individuals' past legal issues, even if minor or expunged, introduce a layer of complexity that necessitates careful consideration of eligibility criteria under Alabama law. A hasty decision to acquire a firearm without understanding these nuances could lead to legal repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves proactively verifying eligibility for a pistol permit in Alabama before acquiring a firearm. This means consulting the relevant Alabama code sections pertaining to pistol permits and firearm eligibility, which would include understanding any disqualifying factors, such as certain misdemeanor convictions or other legal prohibitions. This approach ensures compliance with state law, avoids potential legal entanglements, and upholds responsible firearm ownership practices. It directly addresses the risk of noncompliance by seeking clarity on legal requirements upfront. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the past offense was minor and expunged, it will not affect pistol permit eligibility. Alabama law may have specific provisions regarding expunged records and firearm eligibility that differ from general assumptions. Failing to verify this could lead to a denial of the permit or even legal consequences if a firearm is acquired based on an incorrect assumption. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with purchasing a firearm immediately and then attempt to obtain a permit afterward. This reverses the proper order of operations. Alabama law requires individuals to possess a valid permit to carry a pistol in public, and the permit application process is designed to vet eligibility before a firearm is carried. Acquiring a firearm without first confirming eligibility for a permit could be seen as a disregard for the established legal framework. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from friends or online forums regarding pistol permit eligibility. While well-intentioned, such advice may not be accurate, up-to-date, or specific to Alabama's legal requirements. Legal eligibility for firearm permits is a matter of statutory law, and relying on hearsay rather than official sources or legal counsel is a significant professional and legal risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a systematic approach. First, identify the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction, Alabama in this case, concerning the activity in question, pistol permits. Second, consult official sources of law and regulation. Third, if there is any ambiguity or personal history that might affect eligibility, seek clarification from the issuing authority or qualified legal counsel. Finally, act only after confirming compliance with all legal prerequisites. This structured decision-making process minimizes risk and ensures adherence to legal and ethical standards. Question 5. Analysis of a friend's request to borrow a pistol for an extended period, given the friend's stated desire to eventually own a firearm legally in Alabama, prompts a risk assessment. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the individual holding the pistol? Option A. Advise the friend to pursue the legal channels for firearm acquisition, such as purchasing through a licensed dealer or understanding the legal requirements for private sales in Alabama. Option B. Facilitate a direct, undocumented transfer of the pistol to the friend, with the intention of formalizing the ownership later. Option C. Offer to hold onto the pistol for the friend until they are able to sort out their firearm ownership status. Option D. Allow the friend to borrow the pistol indefinitely, with the understanding that it will be returned later, as long as the friend is not a prohibited person. The correct answer is A. Advise the friend to pursue the legal channels for firearm acquisition, such as purchasing through a licensed dealer or understanding the legal requirements for private sales in Alabama. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the desire to assist a friend with the strict legal requirements for firearm ownership and transfer in Alabama. The risk assessment involves understanding the potential legal ramifications of improperly facilitating a firearm transfer, which could include criminal charges and civil liability, as well as the ethical implications of potentially enabling an unqualified individual to possess a firearm. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Alabama law while maintaining personal relationships. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves advising the friend to independently pursue the legal channels for firearm acquisition. This approach is correct because Alabama law, while not requiring a permit to purchase or possess a pistol, does have specific requirements for private sales and transfers, particularly concerning background checks. By directing the friend to follow the established legal procedures, such as purchasing through a licensed dealer who will conduct a background check, or understanding the legalities of private sales, the individual avoids any involvement in a potentially illegal transfer. This aligns with the principle of responsible firearm ownership and adherence to state statutes, preventing any appearance of aiding or abetting an unlawful transaction. Incorrect approach is analysis. Advising the friend to simply borrow the pistol indefinitely without a formal transfer or purchase, even if the friend is otherwise legally eligible to own a firearm, creates a situation where the original owner retains legal responsibility for a firearm that is not in their direct control. This circumvents the spirit of firearm transfer laws and could lead to complications if the borrowed firearm is used in a crime or lost. Facilitating a direct, undocumented transfer of the pistol to the friend, even with the intention of a later formalization, is legally precarious. Alabama law, while less stringent on private sales than some states, still requires adherence to federal regulations regarding background checks for sales by individuals who engage in the business of selling firearms. Even for casual private sales, knowingly transferring a firearm to someone who is legally prohibited from possessing it carries severe penalties. Offering to hold onto the pistol for the friend until they sort things out is also problematic. This creates a de facto transfer of possession without a legal transfer of ownership, and could still implicate the original owner if the firearm is misused or if the friend is later found to be prohibited from possessing it. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, especially those involving regulated items like firearms, must prioritize legal compliance and ethical conduct. When faced with a situation involving a friend's request that touches upon legal requirements, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant laws and regulations, in this case, Alabama firearm laws. 2. Assessing the risks associated with different courses of action, both legally and ethically. 3. Prioritizing adherence to the law over personal convenience or obligation to a friend. 4. Communicating clearly and directly with the individual, explaining the legal requirements and offering guidance on how to comply, rather than facilitating or advising on potentially illegal shortcuts. Question 6. Consider a scenario where you are at a public park in Alabama and observe an individual behaving erratically, pacing back and forth and speaking loudly to themselves. You feel a sense of unease, but the individual has not made any direct threats or aggressive movements towards you or anyone else. What is the most prudent course of action to assess and manage this situation from a risk management perspective? Option A. Maintain a safe distance. Observe the individual's behavior for any escalation towards imminent threat, and if necessary, discreetly move yourself and any companions to a safer location, while considering reporting the behavior to park authorities or law enforcement if it persists or escalates. Option B. Confront the individual directly, asserting your presence and questioning their behavior to establish control of the situation. Option C. Immediately approach the individual to inquire about their well-being and intentions, believing that direct engagement is the best way to de-escalate any potential threat. Option D. Discreetly draw your legally permitted concealed firearm to be prepared for any sudden aggressive action, as a proactive measure to deter potential harm. Correct answer is A. Maintain a safe distance, observe the individual's behavior for any escalation towards imminent threat, and if necessary, discreetly move yourself and any companions to a safer location, while considering reporting the behavior to park authorities or law enforcement if it persists or escalates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate desire to protect oneself and family with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding firearm ownership and use in Alabama. The risk assessment involves evaluating potential threats, understanding the legal framework for self-defense, and recognizing the severe consequences of misjudging a situation or acting outside legal parameters. The challenge lies in making a prudent decision that minimizes legal and ethical risks while addressing a perceived threat. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the immediate threat, considering all available information and the legal standards for the use of deadly force in Alabama. This means evaluating whether the perceived threat is imminent, credible, and poses a serious risk of death or serious bodily harm. If the assessment indicates that the threat is not imminent or severe enough to justify the use of deadly force under Alabama law, the responsible action is to avoid confrontation and seek to de-escalate or escape the situation if possible, while also considering reporting the threat to law enforcement if appropriate. This approach aligns with Alabama's self-defense laws, which generally require a reasonable belief of imminent danger before deadly force is justified, and emphasizes responsible firearm ownership and the avoidance of unnecessary escalation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately brandish or discharge a firearm based solely on a subjective feeling of unease or a perceived, but not imminent, threat. This fails to meet the legal threshold for self-defense in Alabama, which requires a reasonable belief of imminent danger of death or serious bodily harm. Acting on such a subjective feeling can lead to criminal charges, including assault or homicide, and violates the ethical responsibility to use firearms only as a last resort when legally justified. Another incorrect approach is to rely on assumptions about an individual's intentions without concrete evidence of a threat. For example, assuming someone is a threat simply because they are in a particular area or appear suspicious, without any overt actions indicating immediate danger, is legally and ethically unsound. Alabama law requires more than mere suspicion. It demands a reasonable apprehension of immediate harm. This approach risks violating the rights of others and can lead to legal repercussions for unwarranted aggression. Further incorrect approach is to prioritize the perceived need to assert dominance or control over a situation rather than assessing the actual threat to safety. This can manifest as escalating a minor confrontation or using the presence of a firearm to intimidate. Such actions are not legally justifiable under Alabama's self-defense statutes and demonstrate a failure to exercise responsible judgment and restraint, which are paramount for firearm owners. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and personal safety. This involves 1. Threat assessment. Objectively evaluate the imminence and severity of any perceived threat. 2. Legal standard application. Understand and apply Alabama's specific laws regarding the use of force, particularly deadly force. 3. De-escalation and avoidance. Prioritize de-escalation and avoidance of confrontation whenever possible. 4. Proportionality. Ensure any response is proportionate to the threat. 5. Documentation and reporting. If a threat is credible but not immediately actionable with force, consider reporting it to authorities. This systematic approach ensures that actions are legally defensible, ethically sound, and focused on minimizing harm to all parties involved. Question 7. During the evaluation of a client's potential need to carry a pistol for personal protection in Alabama, what is the most prudent course of action to ensure legal compliance and mitigate risk? Option A. Assume a pistol permit is always required for any pistol possession within Alabama to err on the side of caution. Option B. Rely on advice from a friend who has carried a pistol for years in Alabama regarding permit requirements. Option C. Conclude that no permit is necessary as long as the pistol is not carried in a concealed manner. Option D. Research the current Alabama statutes and official guidance from the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency regarding pistol permits, concealed carry regulations, and reciprocity agreements. The correct answer is D. Research the current Alabama statutes and official guidance from the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency regarding pistol permits, concealed carry regulations, and reciprocity agreements. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to assess a situation involving potential firearm possession and the associated legal requirements in Alabama, specifically concerning the need for a pistol permit. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the legal obligations and risks without making assumptions or acting on incomplete information, which could lead to legal repercussions or unsafe practices. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of Alabama law regarding pistol permits and concealed carry. The best professional approach involves proactively seeking accurate information about Alabama's pistol permit laws and understanding the specific circumstances under which a permit is required or beneficial for carrying a pistol. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and personal safety by ensuring that any decision to carry a pistol is made with full knowledge of the relevant statutes and regulations. Alabama law, while not mandating a permit for all pistol possession, outlines specific requirements for concealed carry and reciprocity with other states, making informed decision-making crucial. Understanding these requirements, such as the age restrictions and prohibited places, is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a pistol permit is always required for any pistol possession within Alabama. This is a flawed assumption because Alabama law distinguishes between open and concealed carry, and permit requirements can vary. Another incorrect approach is to rely on hearsay or informal advice from friends or acquaintances regarding pistol permit requirements. This is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses the authoritative sources of legal information and can lead to misinterpretations of the law, potentially resulting in violations. Finally, assuming that permit is unnecessary simply because one is not actively carrying a pistol in a concealed manner is also an inadequate approach, as it fails to consider the broader legal framework and potential future scenarios. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, potential pistol possession, and legal requirements. Next, they should commit to gathering information from authoritative sources, such as the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, ALEA, or official state statutes, to understand the specific regulations. This is followed by an assessment of personal circumstances against these regulations to determine the appropriate course of action, prioritizing legal compliance and safety. Question 8. Research into the application process for an Alabama pistol permit reveals an applicant has a stated purpose of self-defense for their residence. However, during the background check, a report indicates the applicant has been involved in several verbal altercations in public places within the last year, though no arrests were made. Considering the risk assessment framework for firearm permits in Alabama, which of the following actions best reflects responsible professional judgment? Option A. Request further documentation from the applicant detailing their specific self-defense needs and the circumstances of the public altercations. Option B. Proceed with issuing the permit after verifying all objective eligibility criteria are met, while noting the public altercations for future reference. Option C. Deny the permit immediately due to the reported public altercations, as this indicates a potential for irresponsible behavior. Option D. Issue the permit but attach a formal warning to the applicant regarding their public conduct and the responsibilities of firearm ownership. The correct answer is B. Proceed with issuing the permit after verifying all objective eligibility criteria are met, while noting the public altercations for future reference. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent with the potential for misuse of a firearm, even if the permit is technically obtainable. The challenge lies in assessing risk beyond the mere fulfillment of objective criteria, considering the broader public safety implications. Careful judgment is required to ensure that issuing a permit aligns with the spirit of firearm safety regulations, not just the letter. The best professional approach involves a thorough risk assessment that goes beyond the applicant's stated purpose and considers any red flags or concerning information that might have emerged during the application process. This approach prioritizes public safety by acknowledging that even with a seemingly legitimate reason, certain behaviors or circumstances could indicate a higher risk of misuse. This aligns with the underlying principle of firearm permitting laws, which aim to ensure that only responsible individuals possess firearms, thereby safeguarding the community. The Alabama Code, while outlining the process for obtaining a pistol permit, implicitly requires the issuing authority to exercise reasonable judgment in assessing an applicant's suitability, considering factors that might suggest a propensity for violence or irresponsible handling of a firearm. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's stated purpose without any further inquiry or consideration of contextual factors. This fails to adequately assess risk and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an individual who, despite a plausible stated reason, may pose a danger. This approach is ethically problematic as it prioritizes administrative ease over public safety and may violate the implicit duty of care held by the issuing authority. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit solely based on a subjective feeling or a vague concern without concrete evidence or a clear violation of statutory requirements. While caution is necessary, arbitrary denial based on unsubstantiated feelings is professionally unacceptable and could lead to legal challenges. The decision to deny must be based on objective criteria or demonstrable risk factors that are recognized within the framework of firearm regulations. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted risk assessment. This begins with a review of all submitted documentation and a verification of objective eligibility criteria. Crucially, it then involves considering any additional information that may have come to light, such as past incidents, concerning statements, or behavioral patterns, even if they do not constitute an outright disqualification under the statute. The decision-maker must then weigh the potential risks against the applicant's stated intent and the statutory requirements, always erring on the side of public safety when significant concerns are present. This involves a reasoned judgment, documented thoroughly, that justifies the decision based on the totality of the circumstances and the governing Alabama law. Question 9. System analysis indicates a resident of Alabama is moving their household belongings, including a legally owned pistol, from one residence to another within the state. The pistol is currently unloaded. What is the most prudent and legally compliant method for transporting the pistol during this move? Option A. Transport the pistol unloaded but placed loosely in a bag in the trunk of the vehicle. Option B. Transport the pistol unloaded and secured in a locked container, separate from ammunition within the vehicle. Option C. Transport the pistol loaded and openly visible on the passenger seat of the vehicle. Option D. Transport the pistol concealed on their person as they are moving their personal effects. The correct answer is B. Transport the pistol unloaded and secured in a locked container, separate from ammunition, within the vehicle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate desire to protect oneself and family with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding firearm possession and transport in Alabama. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Alabama law regarding carrying pistols, especially when moving between locations, and the potential risks associated with improper handling or storage. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the law and to mitigate any potential safety hazards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and adhering to Alabama's specific regulations for carrying pistols. This means recognizing that, while Alabama law generally permits carrying pistols, there are conditions and requirements, particularly concerning concealed versus open carry, and the need for a permit for concealed carry. The most prudent approach is to ensure that any pistol being transported is unloaded and secured in a locked container, separate from ammunition, when moving between locations, especially if a permit is not readily available or if the specific circumstances of transport are unclear under Alabama law. This aligns with the principle of responsible firearm ownership and minimizes legal and safety risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Transporting a loaded pistol openly or concealed without a valid Alabama pistol permit, or without ensuring it is unloaded and secured in a locked container separate from ammunition when moving between locations, is a direct violation of Alabama law. Failure to comply with specific statutory requirements can lead to severe legal penalties, including arrest and criminal charges. Furthermore, transporting a loaded firearm unsecured poses a significant safety risk to the individual, passengers, and the public, demonstrating a disregard for ethical responsibilities associated with firearm ownership. Leaving a pistol unsecured in a vehicle, even if unloaded, also presents a risk of theft and subsequent misuse, which is an ethical failure to safeguard the firearm. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and safety. This involves 1. Identifying the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction Alabama regarding firearm transport. 2. Assessing the immediate circumstances and potential risks. 3. Choosing the course of action that most effectively mitigates risk and ensures legal adherence, even if it requires additional steps like unloading and securing the firearm. When in doubt about the legality of a particular method of transport, the safest and most legally sound option should always be chosen. Question 10. The control framework reveals that a firearm dealer in Alabama has acquired a specific model of pistol for $700. The dealer estimates that the current market value for this pistol ranges from $850 to $100, with associated selling fees, including background checks and transfer costs, averaging 5% of the selling price. If the dealer aims to achieve a minimum net profit of $150, what is the lowest selling price the dealer must target to meet this objective, assuming the higher end of the market value is achievable? Option A, $900, 00. Option B, $100, 00. Option C, $1050, 00. Option D, $995, 00. The correct answer is D. $995, 00. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario involving the potential for financial loss due to a fluctuating market for a specific type of firearm. This is professionally challenging because it requires a precise understanding of risk management principles and the application of financial calculations to determine the most prudent course of action, balancing potential profit against the risk of significant loss. The Alabama Pistol Permit Exam, while optional, emphasizes responsible firearm ownership, which extends to understanding the financial implications of firearm transactions, especially in a commercial context. The best approach involves calculating the potential profit or loss at various price points and determining the break-even point to assess the viability of the transaction. This requires understanding the initial investment, the potential selling price, and the associated costs. Specifically, one would calculate the net profit or loss by subtracting the total costs, purchase price plus any associated fees, from the potential revenue. The break-even point is the selling price at which total revenue equals total costs, resulting in zero profit or loss. This analytical method directly addresses the financial risk by quantifying potential outcomes and informing a decision based on objective data, aligning with the principle of prudent financial management expected of responsible individuals involved in firearm-related activities, even if not strictly regulated by the permit exam itself. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a gut feeling or a general market trend without performing specific calculations. This fails to quantify the risk and could lead to a decision based on emotion rather than sound financial judgment, potentially resulting in substantial financial losses. Another incorrect approach is to focus only on the maximum potential profit without considering the downside risk and the probability of achieving that maximum. This demonstrates a lack of comprehensive risk assessment and an overemphasis on optimistic outcomes, which is professionally unsound. Finally, making a decision based on anecdotal evidence from other sellers without verifying the current market data and performing personal calculations is also flawed, as market conditions can change rapidly and individual circumstances vary. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objective, e.g., to sell the firearm at profit. This is followed by gathering all relevant financial data, purchase price, fees, estimated selling price range. Next, perform quantitative analysis, including calculating potential profit/loss at different price points and determining the break-even point. Finally, evaluate the calculated outcomes against the individual's risk tolerance and financial goals to make an informed decision. Question 11. Governance review demonstrates that while an Alabama resident has successfully obtained a pistol permit, a comprehensive risk assessment for carrying a concealed pistol in public spaces has not been conducted. Which of the following represents the most prudent and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Prioritize personal convenience and carry the pistol in the most easily accessible manner, regardless of potential security implications or environmental appropriateness. Option B. Conduct a thorough personal risk assessment considering the environments where the pistol will be carried, the individual's preparedness, and potential situational factors that could increase risk. Option C. Rely solely on the absence of explicit prohibitions in Alabama law regarding specific carrying locations, without evaluating the broader implications for public safety and responsible gun ownership. Option D. Assume that obtaining the pistol permit fulfills all safety obligations, and proceed with carrying the pistol without further consideration of specific carrying scenarios. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough personal risk assessment considering the environments where the pistol will be carried, the individual's preparedness, and potential situational factors that could increase risk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the desire to exercise a lawful right with the responsibility to ensure that such exercise does not inadvertently create a public safety risk or violate any implicit community expectations regarding responsible firearm ownership. The challenge lies in assessing potential risks beyond the immediate legal requirements for permit acquisition, considering the broader context of community safety and responsible behavior. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that, while technically legal, could be perceived as reckless or inconsiderate, potentially undermining public trust and safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively assessing potential risks associated with carrying a pistol, even after obtaining a permit. This includes considering the environment where the pistol will be carried, the individual's own state of mind and preparedness, and any specific circumstances that might elevate the risk of accidental discharge, misuse, or theft. This approach aligns with the ethical imperative of responsible gun ownership, which extends beyond mere legal compliance to encompass a commitment to public safety and minimizing potential harm. While Alabama law permits carrying a pistol with a permit, responsible gun owners are expected to exercise discretion and foresight in how and where they carry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that legal permit acquisition automatically negates all potential risks and responsibilities. This overlooks the practical realities of firearm safety and the potential for unforeseen circumstances. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize convenience or personal preference over a thorough risk assessment, such as carrying a pistol in a manner that is easily accessible but less secure, or in environments where its presence might be perceived as unnecessarily provocative or intimidating. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the absence of explicit prohibition, without considering the spirit of responsible gun ownership and community safety, fails to meet professional ethical standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying potential hazards, assessing the likelihood and severity of harm, and implementing measures to mitigate those risks. In the context of pistol permits in Alabama, this means going beyond the minimum legal requirements to consider the practical implications of carrying a firearm. This includes self-assessment of readiness, situational awareness, and understanding the environment. When in doubt, consulting with experienced firearm instructors or law enforcement for guidance on best practices for safe and responsible carrying is advisable. Question 12. Process analysis reveals that an Alabama resident is considering purchasing a handgun for personal protection and is aware that a pistol permit is not strictly required for possession within their private residence. However, they frequently travel throughout the state for work and occasionally wish to carry the handgun discreetly in their vehicle for self-defense. Considering Alabama's firearm regulations, what is the most prudent course of action to ensure lawful carrying of the handgun in public and in their vehicle? Option A. Rely on informal advice from friends regarding the legality of carrying a concealed handgun without a permit. Option B. Carry the pistol openly in their vehicle to avoid the need for a concealed carry permit. Option C. Assume that since a permit is optional for possession, it is also optional for carrying a concealed pistol in their vehicle. Option D. Obtain an Alabama pistol permit to legally carry a concealed pistol in public and in their vehicle. Correct answer is D. Obtain an Alabama pistol permit to legally carry a concealed pistol in public and in their vehicle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding firearm possession and use in Alabama. The core tension lies in understanding when and how a pistol permit, even if optional for possession, impacts the lawful carrying of a concealed weapon and the potential consequences of misinterpreting these regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid legal repercussions and ensure responsible firearm ownership. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding that while Alabama law may not mandate a pistol permit for simple possession of a handgun in one's home or vehicle, it is a crucial document for legally carrying a concealed pistol in public places. Therefore, the most prudent and legally compliant approach is to obtain a pistol permit. This approach is correct because Alabama law, specifically the Code of Alabama Title 13A, Chapter 11, Section 13A11-70, outlines the requirements for carrying a pistol concealed on one's person or in a vehicle. While possession is generally permitted, carrying it concealed without a permit is a violation. Obtaining a permit demonstrates due diligence and adherence to the state's regulations for carrying a concealed weapon, thereby mitigating legal risk and ensuring lawful conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because a pistol permit is optional for possession, it is also optional for carrying a concealed pistol in public. This fails to recognize the distinction between possession and concealed carrying, leading to a violation of Alabama law regarding concealed firearms. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specific legal framework governing the carrying of handguns in public spaces. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice or personal interpretation of the law without consulting official sources or obtaining the permit. This can lead to significant legal consequences, as ignorance of the law is not a valid defense. It bypasses the established legal process for ensuring lawful concealed carry and exposes the individual to potential criminal charges. A further incorrect approach is to believe that carrying a pistol openly negates the need for a permit for concealed carry. While open carry laws exist in Alabama, They are distinct from concealed carry regulations. Attempting to circumvent concealed carry requirements by carrying openly, without understanding the specific nuances of both open and concealed carry, laws can still lead to legal issues, depending on the circumstances and local ordinances. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a proactive and informed approach. This involves thoroughly researching the specific firearm laws of Alabama, including those pertaining to possession, open carry, and concealed carry. Consulting official state resources, such as the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, ALEA website, or relevant statutes, is paramount. When in doubt, seeking clarification from legal counsel or law enforcement is advisable. The decision-making process should prioritize legal compliance and responsible firearm ownership over assumptions or informal advice, ensuring that all actions taken are within the bounds of the law. Question 13. Which approach would be the most prudent and legally compliant method for a resident of Alabama to ensure they are lawfully permitted to carry a pistol for self-defense, considering the state's regulatory framework for firearm permits? Option A. Carry a pistol based on a personal assessment that the risk to oneself warrants immediate self-defense without obtaining a permit. Option B. Rely on informal advice from acquaintances who have previously carried pistols regarding the necessity of a permit. Option C. Assume that a lack of any criminal convictions automatically allows for the legal carrying of a pistol without a permit in Alabama. Option D. Thoroughly research and comply with all requirements outlined in Alabama Code for obtaining a pistol permit, including any mandated training and background checks. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly research and comply with all requirements outlined in Alabama Code for obtaining a pistol permit, including any mandated training and background checks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their personal desire to carry a firearm for self-defense with the legal requirements and responsibilities mandated by Alabama law. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of the permit process, particularly the role of risk assessment in determining eligibility, and avoiding actions that could lead to legal repercussions or compromise public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal prerequisites are met before carrying a pistol. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively understanding and fulfilling all statutory requirements for obtaining a pistol permit in Alabama. This includes completing any mandated training, undergoing the necessary background checks, and demonstrating a legitimate reason for carrying a pistol, as outlined in Alabama Code Title 13A, Chapter 11, Part 7. The risk assessment here is embedded within the legal framework itself. The state has already assessed the general risk associated with firearm possession and has established criteria to mitigate that risk through the permitting process. By adhering strictly to these established legal procedures, an individual demonstrates responsible intent and compliance, which is the ethically and legally sound approach. Incorrect approaches analysis. Attempting to carry a pistol without first obtaining a permit based on a personal assessment of risk is a direct violation of Alabama law. This approach bypasses the state's established risk assessment and screening process, which is designed to ensure that individuals carrying firearms do not pose an undue risk to themselves or others. It is both legally impermissible and ethically irresponsible. Relying solely on the advice of friends or informal sources regarding permit requirements, without consulting official Alabama statutes or law enforcement agencies, is also an unacceptable approach. This can lead to misunderstandings of the law, potentially resulting in unintentional violations. The legal framework for pistol permits is specific and must be followed precisely. Assuming that a clean criminal record automatically grants the right to carry a pistol without a permit ignores the explicit legal requirements for a permit, including the application process and any specific criteria that may be outlined in Alabama Code. A clean record is a prerequisite, but not the entirety of the permitting process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving legal requirements with a commitment to thorough research and strict adherence to established laws and regulations. This involves consulting official sources, understanding the purpose behind regulations, in this case, public safety and responsible firearm ownership, and prioritizing compliance over personal convenience or informal advice. A systematic approach, starting with understanding the legal framework and then meticulously fulfilling each requirement, is crucial for ethical and legal conduct. Question 14. Investigation of a resident's understanding of Alabama's firearm laws reveals a belief that a pistol permit is always mandatory for carrying a pistol in a vehicle. Which of the following best reflects the legally permissible actions for carrying a pistol in a vehicle in Alabama, assuming the individual is otherwise legally permitted to possess a firearm? Option A. A pistol permit is always required to carry a pistol in a vehicle in Alabama, regardless of its visibility or accessibility. Option B. A pistol may be carried in a vehicle without a permit, provided it is not concealed on the person and is in plain view or otherwise accessible. Option C. Carrying a pistol in a vehicle is prohibited in Alabama unless the individual has a valid pistol permit. Option D. A pistol can only be carried in a vehicle if it is unloaded and stored in a locked container. The correct answer is B. A pistol may be carried in a vehicle without a permit, provided it is not concealed on the person and is in plain view or otherwise accessible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-protection with the legal and ethical responsibilities associated with firearm ownership and use in Alabama. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Alabama law regarding the lawful carrying of a pistol, particularly when considering the potential for escalation of a situation and the justification for using deadly force. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could lead to legal repercussions or endanger oneself or others. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of Alabama's laws concerning pistol permits and the conditions under which a pistol may be lawfully carried. This includes recognizing that while Alabama law generally permits the carrying of a pistol, there are specific exceptions and requirements, such as the need for a permit for carrying a pistol in a vehicle or concealed on one's person without a permit in certain circumstances. The correct approach emphasizes proactive legal compliance and responsible firearm handling. Specifically, understanding that Alabama law allows for the carrying of a pistol in a vehicle or concealed on one's person without a permit, provided the individual is not otherwise prohibited from possessing a firearm, is crucial. This approach prioritizes knowledge of the law to ensure lawful possession and carrying, thereby mitigating legal risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that simply possessing a pistol grants the right to carry it openly or concealed in any location, without further consideration of Alabama's specific statutes. This fails to acknowledge the legal framework that governs firearm possession and carrying, potentially leading to violations of the law. Another incorrect approach is to believe that a pistol permit is universally required for any form of pistol carrying in Alabama. While permits offer certain advantages and are required for carrying in specific contexts, like carrying in a vehicle without being in your line of sight, Alabama law has provisions for carrying without a permit under certain conditions. This misunderstanding can lead to unnecessary apprehension or overcompliance, or conversely, a false sense of security. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the perceived threat of a situation, without first confirming the legality of carrying the pistol in that specific context under Alabama law. This prioritizes a reactive stance over a proactive, legally compliant one, potentially leading to the unlawful brandishing or use of a firearm. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of relevant state laws, such as Alabama's statutes on pistol permits and the lawful carrying of firearms. This knowledge should be the foundation for all actions related to firearm possession and carrying. When faced with a situation that might necessitate carrying a pistol, the professional should first assess their legal standing under Alabama law. This involves understanding the permit requirements, the conditions for carrying with or without a permit, and the specific locations where carrying is permitted or prohibited. Ethical considerations, such as the responsible use of force and the avoidance of unnecessary escalation, should also be integrated into this decision-making process. Question 15. Assessment of an individual's past legal history in Alabama for the purpose of obtaining a pistol permit requires careful consideration of specific statutory disqualifications. If an applicant had an arrest for simple assault 5 years ago, where the charges were subsequently dismissed by the prosecutor, what is the most prudent course of action when completing the pistol permit application? Option A. Assume that since the charges were dismissed, it does not need to be disclosed as it did not result in a conviction. Option B. Only disclose the arrest if specifically asked about arrests, not convictions, on the application form. Option C. Rely on the advice of a friend who also has a pistol permit and was told that dismissed charges are not a concern. Option D. Fully disclose the arrest and dismissal on the application, and be prepared to provide any requested documentation or explanation to the issuing authority. The correct answer is D. Fully disclose the arrest and dismissal on the application, and be prepared to provide any requested documentation or explanation to the issuing authority. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their personal desire to carry a firearm for self-defense with the legal requirements and responsibilities mandated by Alabama law for obtaining and maintaining a pistol permit. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing one's own suitability and understanding the implications of past actions on eligibility. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal prerequisites are met, avoiding any misrepresentation or omission of information that could lead to permit denial or revocation. The best professional approach involves a thorough and honest self-assessment of eligibility criteria as outlined by Alabama law, specifically focusing on any past legal entanglements that might impact the application. This includes proactively researching and understanding the specific disqualifying factors, such as felony convictions, certain misdemeanor convictions, or documented instances of domestic violence, as defined by Alabama Code Title 13A, Chapter 11, Part 7. By honestly evaluating one's history against these statutes, an applicant ensures they are proceeding with a clear understanding of their legal standing and are not attempting to obtain a permit under false pretenses. This aligns with the ethical obligation to be truthful in all dealings with law enforcement and licensing authorities, and the legal requirement to meet all statutory qualifications. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a past arrest, even if charges were dropped, does not affect pistol permit eligibility without verifying this with the relevant authorities or understanding the nuances of Alabama's disqualifying offenses. Alabama law can consider arrests and the circumstances surrounding them, even if not resulting in a conviction, in certain disqualification contexts, particularly concerning domestic violence. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice from friends or online forums rather than consulting the official Alabama Code or the issuing law enforcement agency. This bypasses the authoritative legal framework and can lead to significant misunderstandings of eligibility. Finally, intentionally omitting any mention of past legal issues, even if believed to be minor or resolved favorably, constitutes a misrepresentation of facts, which is a direct violation of the application process and can have severe legal consequences, including permit denial and potential criminal charges. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the specific legal requirements for obtaining a pistol permit in Alabama. 2. Conducting a comprehensive and honest review of one's personal history against these requirements. 3. Seeking clarification from official sources, Alabama Code, Sheriff's Office, if any aspect of eligibility is unclear. 4. Acting with full transparency and accuracy throughout the application process. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a heightened awareness of potential threats, prompting an individual in Alabama to consider carrying a pistol for personal protection. Given the legal landscape in Alabama, what is the most prudent and legally compliant course of action to ensure responsible firearm carriage for self-defense? Option A. Obtain a pistol permit from the Alabama Sheriff's Office. Option B. Carry the pistol openly, believing it negates the need for a permit. Option C. Assume the right to self-defense allows concealed carry without a permit. Option D. Rely on reciprocity agreements from other states without verifying Alabama's acceptance. Correct answer is A. Obtain a pistol permit from the Alabama Sheriff's Office. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal requirements for carrying a pistol in Alabama. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Alabama law regarding pistol permits and the potential legal ramifications of carrying a pistol without proper authorization, even if the intent is for personal protection. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with state statutes, thereby avoiding criminal charges and upholding the principles of responsible firearm ownership. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding that Alabama law, while permitting the carrying of pistols under certain circumstances, generally requires a pistol permit for concealed carry. Therefore, the most appropriate action is to obtain the necessary pistol permit from the Alabama Sheriff's Office. This approach aligns with Alabama Code Title 13A, Chapter 11, which outlines regulations concerning firearms and their carrying. Obtaining a permit demonstrates due diligence and adherence to the legal framework established for carrying pistols, ensuring that the individual is acting within the bounds of the law and minimizing legal risk. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that the right to self-defense inherently grants the right to carry a pistol concealed without a permit. While Alabama law recognizes the right to self-defense, it also mandates specific procedures for carrying firearms. Proceeding without a permit, even with the intent of self-defense, could lead to charges of carrying a concealed weapon without a permit, a violation of Alabama law. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a misunderstanding of reciprocity agreements with other states. While Alabama may have reciprocity with some states for concealed carry permits, this does not negate the requirement for a permit if one is not already legally possessed and valid in Alabama. Carrying a pistol without a valid Alabama permit or a permit recognized under reciprocity laws is a violation. A third incorrect approach is to believe that simply owning a pistol legally grants the right to carry it concealed anywhere in Alabama. Legal ownership is distinct from the legal right to carry a firearm, especially in a concealed manner. Alabama law specifically differentiates between the two and requires a permit for concealed carry, irrespective of legal ownership. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a proactive and informed approach. This involves thoroughly researching and understanding the specific firearm laws of Alabama, including requirements for permits, types of carry concealed vs open, and any exceptions. Consulting official state resources, such as the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency or the relevant sheriff's office, is crucial. If there is any doubt about legal requirements, seeking advice from a qualified legal professional specializing in firearm law is the most prudent course of action. This ensures that actions taken are compliant with all applicable statutes and ethical responsibilities. Question 17. Process analysis reveals that an individual in Alabama possessing a valid concealed carry permit is entering a county courthouse for a scheduled appointment. They are carrying their legally owned pistol, which is concealed. Upon arrival, they realize that courthouses are designated as prohibited locations for carrying firearms under Alabama law. What is the most legally compliant and professionally responsible course of action for this individual? Option A. Leave the pistol unsecured in the glove compartment of their vehicle while they attend their appointment. Option B. Attempt to conceal the pistol more effectively and proceed into the courthouse, hoping not to be detected. Option C. Securely store the pistol out of sight in their vehicle, complying with any Alabama statutes regarding firearm storage in vehicles on private property before entering the courthouse. Option D. Ask a courthouse employee if they can temporarily hold the pistol until their appointment is concluded. The correct answer is C. Securely store the pistol out of sight in their vehicle, complying with any Alabama statutes regarding firearm storage in vehicles on private property before entering the courthouse. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-protection with the legal and ethical obligation surrounding firearm possession and transport in Alabama. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Alabama's laws regarding concealed carry permits, the specific locations where firearms are prohibited, and the responsible handling of a firearm when not actively carrying it. Misinterpreting these regulations can lead to serious legal consequences, including criminal charges, and can compromise public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable statutes and to act in a manner that is both lawful and ethically sound. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and adhering strictly to Alabama's laws regarding pistol permits and prohibited places. This means recognizing that even with a valid permit, carrying a pistol into a designated prohibited area, such as a courthouse or polling place, is illegal. Furthermore, if a permit holder needs to temporarily store a firearm, they must do so in a manner that is secure and compliant with any specific storage requirements outlined by Alabama law or the policies of the establishment being entered. In this case, the most responsible action is to leave the pistol secured in the vehicle, out of sight, and in compliance with any applicable Alabama statutes concerning firearm storage in vehicles on private property, rather than attempting to carry it into a prohibited area or leaving it unsecured. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and public safety by ensuring the firearm is not accessible in a location where its presence is forbidden. Incorrect approach is analysis. Attempting to carry the pistol into the courthouse, even if concealed and with a valid permit, is a direct violation of Alabama law, as courthouses are explicitly listed as prohibited locations for carrying firearms under Alabama Code Section 13A 11-72. This action demonstrates a failure to understand or respect the legal restrictions on firearm possession in specific public spaces. Leaving the pistol unsecured in the vehicle, such as on the seat or in an unlocked glove compartment, poses a significant safety risk and could be a violation of Alabama law regarding the secure storage of firearms, particularly if the vehicle is accessible to unauthorized individuals. This approach fails to exercise due diligence in preventing unauthorized access to a firearm. Asking a courthouse employee to hold the pistol is also an inappropriate and potentially illegal action. It places an undue burden on an employee, potentially exposes them to liability, and bypasses established legal procedures for firearm storage or prohibition. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of both legal responsibilities and professional conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing situations involving firearm possession and legal restriction should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, public safety, and ethical conduct. This framework involves 1. Thoroughly understanding all applicable laws and regulations of the specific jurisdiction, in this case Alabama. This includes knowing permit requirements, prohibited locations, and storage regulations. 2. Assessing the specific environment and its associated rules. If entering a location with known firearm restrictions, proactively determine how to comply. 3. Prioritizing safety and security. This means ensuring firearms are stored securely and are not accessible to unauthorized individuals. 4. Seeking clarification from official sources if there is any doubt about legal requirements or best practices. 5. Acting with integrity and responsibility, recognizing the serious implications of firearm possession. Question 18. Market research demonstrates that many individuals in Alabama are interested in obtaining a pistol permit for self-defense. Considering the legal framework in Alabama, if an individual possesses a valid pistol permit issued by another state that is not recognized for concealed carry in Alabama, and they are carrying a concealed pistol within Alabama for a brief period while running errands, which of the following best describes the legally compliant approach? Option A. Carry the concealed pistol, relying on the out-of-state permit as sufficient for concealed carry in Alabama. Option B. Refrain from carrying the concealed pistol until a valid Alabama pistol permit is obtained. Option C. Carry the concealed pistol, believing that the short duration of carry negates the legal requirement for an Alabama permit. Option D. Carry the concealed pistol, assuming personal protection needs override the need for an Alabama permit for brief periods. The correct answer is B. Refrain from carrying the concealed pistol until a valid Alabama pistol permit is obtained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict adherence to Alabama law regarding firearm possession. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Alabama's pistol permit requirements and the potential legal ramifications of carrying a concealed pistol without the proper authorization, even in a seemingly low-risk situation. Careful judgment is required to avoid inadvertently violating the law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and complying with Alabama's laws regarding concealed carry. This means recognizing that even for a brief period, and for a seemingly minor reason, carrying a concealed pistol without a valid Alabama pistol permit is a violation of state law. Therefore, the correct approach is to acknowledge the legal requirement for a permit for concealed carry and to refrain from carrying a concealed pistol until such a permit is obtained. This aligns with the principle of lawful conduct and responsible firearm ownership as mandated by Alabama statutes. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a brief, infrequent, or seemingly low-risk situation exempts one from the requirement of a pistol permit for concealed carry. Alabama law does not provide such exemptions for concealed carry. This approach demonstrates a misunderstanding of the law's intent, which is to regulate who can carry a concealed firearm, regardless of the perceived risk or duration of carry. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a permit from another state, without verifying its reciprocity or validity for concealed carry within Alabama. While some states have reciprocity agreements, Alabama has specific requirements for issuing its own pistol permits, and carrying concealed without meeting these requirements, even with an out-of-state permit, can be illegal if that permit is not recognized for concealed carry in Alabama. A further incorrect approach is to believe that personal protection needs automatically supersede legal requirements for carrying a concealed weapon. While the right to self-defense is fundamental, it must be exercised within the bounds of the law. Alabama law clearly outlines the process for obtaining a permit to carry a concealed pistol, and personal perceived need does not grant an exception to this legal process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Alabama should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance above all else when it comes to firearm possession. This involves proactively researching and understanding all relevant state and local laws, including those pertaining to pistol permits and concealed carry. When faced with a situation where carrying a concealed pistol might seem convenient or necessary, the professional should pause and ask, "Am I legally permitted to carry a concealed pistol in Alabama under these circumstances?" If the answer is uncertain or negative, the professional should err on the side of caution and refrain from carrying the weapon until full legal compliance is achieved. This proactive and law-abiding approach minimizes legal risk and upholds responsible citizenship. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that a firearm dealer in Alabama sold a pistol to an individual who claimed to be eligible to own a firearm, but did not present a valid Alabama pistol permit. The dealer proceeded with the sale after a brief conversation about the buyer's background. Which of the following actions best reflects adherence to Alabama's firearm regulations and responsible sales practices in this situation? Option A. Require the buyer to present a valid Alabama pistol permit before completing the sale. Option B. Conduct a federal background check and consider that sufficient for the sale of a pistol in Alabama. Option C. Proceed with the sale based on the buyer's verbal assurance of eligibility and a general understanding of firearm laws. Option D. Complete the sale and then attempt to verify the buyer's eligibility for a pistol permit. The correct answer is A. Require the buyer to present a valid Alabama pistol permit before completing the sale. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in the proper handling of a firearm transaction, specifically concerning the verification of a buyer's eligibility for a pistol permit in Alabama. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of Alabama's specific firearm laws and regulations, balancing the seller's legal obligations with the right to sell a firearm. A failure to adhere to these regulations can lead to severe legal consequences for the seller and potentially facilitate the transfer of a firearm to an ineligible individual, posing a public safety risk. The best professional approach involves diligently verifying the buyer's eligibility for a pistol permit by requiring the buyer to present a valid Alabama pistol permit at the time of sale. This aligns directly with Alabama law, which generally permits the sale of pistols to individuals who possess a valid pistol permit. This proactive verification ensures compliance with state statutes, mitigates the seller's liability, and upholds responsible firearm transfer practices. An incorrect approach would be to assume the buyer is eligible based on their word or a casual conversation about their background. This fails to meet the legal requirement for verification and exposes the seller to significant legal risk under Alabama law, as the burden of ensuring eligibility rests with the seller. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on a federal background check without confirming the presence of a valid Alabama pistol permit, as state-specific permit requirements are distinct from federal checks and are crucial for pistol sales within Alabama. Finally, delaying the verification process until after the sale is completed is a critical failure, as it means the eligibility check was not performed prior to the transfer, violating the spirit and letter of Alabama's firearm regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and risk mitigation. This involves understanding the specific requirements of Alabama's pistol permit laws, always demanding proof of a valid permit from the buyer before completing a pistol sale, and maintaining thorough records of all transactions. When in doubt, consulting legal counsel or relevant law enforcement agencies for clarification on specific situations is a prudent step. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of all associated financial obligations. If an individual in Alabama is considering obtaining a pistol permit and estimates the initial application fee to be $50, the background check fee to be $25, and a mandatory firearms safety course to cost $100, but fails to account for a potential $15 annual renewal fee and a $10 fee for a permit identification card, what is the total underestimated cost for the first year of permit possession? Option A, $100. Option B, $165. Option C, $150. Option D, $175. Correct answer is C, $150. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance the practicalities of firearm ownership with the legal and ethical responsibilities mandated by Alabama law. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing the financial implications of obtaining and maintaining a pistol permit, ensuring compliance with all associated costs, and making a sound financial decision that does not lead to future legal or financial complications. Miscalculating these costs could result in an inability to afford the permit, potential legal issues if the permit is pursued without full financial readiness, or an inefficient allocation of personal resources. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive and accurate calculation of all anticipated costs associated with obtaining and maintaining an Alabama pistol permit. This includes the permit application fee, any required background check fees, the cost of a certified firearm safety course, if applicable and required by local ordinance or personal choice for proficiency, and the potential annual renewal fees. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principle of responsible firearm ownership, which necessitates a full understanding and financial preparedness for all legal requirements and associated expenses. Alabama law, while not mandating a permit for all pistol possession, outlines specific procedures and fees for those who choose to obtain a permit for concealed carry. A thorough financial assessment ensures compliance with these regulations and avoids potential penalties or legal entanglements arising from financial unpreparedness. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves only considering the initial application fee and neglecting other potential costs. This is professionally unacceptable because it demonstrates a failure to conduct a complete risk assessment. Alabama law may have additional fees for background checks or specific training requirements that are not explicitly stated on the initial application form. Ignoring these can lead to unexpected expenses and potential noncompliance if the applicant cannot cover the full cost. Another incorrect approach is to estimate costs based on general knowledge of permit fees in other states or anecdotal information. This is professionally unsound, as it lacks the specificity required for compliance with Alabama's regulatory framework. Permit fees and requirements can vary significantly by state, and relying on inaccurate or generalized information can lead to significant financial miscalculations and a misunderstanding of legal obligations. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize obtaining the permit immediately without a clear understanding of the total financial commitment, hoping to cover costs as they arise. This is ethically and legally problematic. Responsible firearm ownership, as implicitly encouraged by the legal framework surrounding permits, requires foresight and financial prudence. Delaying financial planning until after the permit is obtained can lead to a default on payments, potential revocation of the permit, and a negative mark on one's record, undermining the very purpose of a permit. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the acquisition of any legal permit, including an Alabama pistol permit, with a structured, data-driven methodology. This involves 1. Identifying all explicit legal requirements and associated fees directly from official Alabama law enforcement or licensing agency sources. 2. Researching any ancillary costs, such as mandatory training or specific equipment, that might be legally required or practically necessary for responsible ownership. 3. Creating a detailed budget that accounts for all identified costs, including a contingency for unforeseen minor expenses. 4. Ensuring sufficient funds are available before initiating the application process. This systematic approach minimizes financial risk, ensures legal compliance, and promotes responsible decision-making.